Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel where the Ocarina of Time hype train doesn't stop. I'm coming at you with another Ocarina of Time 2026 video / Ocarina of Time lore video. I'm back in the studio today. I tried something a little bit different with my last video. I did something scripted. I thought it was interesting, but I'm probably not going to do anything like that anytime soon. So just letting you guys know, I am going back to my original format, which is just me here in the truck, just chopping it up with you guys, discussing my thoughts on Zelda. And in this video, I want to talk about how the Shadow Temple is probably the darkest thing that's ever been in a Nintendo game, probably ever, of all time. There's only a few things that come close, and I think most of those elements are in stuff like the Earthbound games, Mother 2 and Mother 3. Apart from that, nothing really touches the Shadow Temple in its darkness, right? You have Majora's Mask, which really goes into some existential and kind of, it covers depression and grief and all that, and the stages of loss, right? But I think it doesn't come close to, Ocarina of Time's Shadow Temple, right? The Shadow Temple is literally Hyrule's torture chamber, right? It's where the royal family sent its political prisoners to be executed, right? So we're talking about the Sheikah, we're talking about, traitors of the royal family. They were literally sent there and imprisoned in tiny cells and awaited their execution, one of many various different torture devices located within the temple. And when you read one of the descriptions with the lens of truth, it says, "Here is gathered Hyrule's history of greed and hatred." And it just goes to show you that this is something that really hasn't been touched on by any other Zelda game or any other Nintendo game for that matter. So I just finished a playthrough of the Shadow Temple, and it was kind of disturbing. When you go through the temple, you see nothing but just rows and rows of guillotines, right? You see chains on the wall, you see crucifixes, all kinds of medieval type torture devices just everywhere scattered throughout the facility, relative to the number of cells. And it really makes you think how many executions actually took place within this temple. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it, considering there aren't that many NPCs in Hyrule. So I don't know if this temple was used during the Great War, right? It was described in the beginning part of the game. And maybe there are a lot more NPCs, but they all got sent to the Shadow Temple to be executed. That's one thought that I had while going through the temple. But then you also have to look at the rows of just rows and rows and rows of skulls and bones just caked and covering the walls. It almost reminds me of the Paris catacombs in France, right? Where it's just like you step on nothing but skulls. There's bones stacked up all on the wall, and it just goes on forever, just hundreds and thousands of bodies and graves there. So that's kind of crazy to think about, right? Even in the room where you fight Dead Hand and you fight some of the Gibdos and Redeads, you notice that there's just nothing but bones just caked the wall. The walls are filthy. The whole temple is just kind of dingy and dimly lit and scungy, and it's really a depressing place in the best way to be in. And it's something unique. I don't really think Nintendo's ever tried anything like this since the Shadow Temple, at least not to my knowledge. I mean, with the lens of truth, it reveals that there's just hidden traps and spikes everywhere, probably to prevent escape from the prisoners, right? You have the big meat kind of tenderizers that come down from the ceiling and right in front of the cells, right? So they'll smash you if you try to escape. I think those were actually intended just to prevent escape from the prisoners, along with all the traps lined up in the dungeons, right? And you also have the beheading scythes, the Grim Reapers, right? Okay, so some of these are plainly seen by the naked eye, and some of them are concealed by some type of magic where you have to use the lens of truth to actually see them. And they just kind of spin continuously, and it makes me wonder how many beheadings actually occurred in this facility. It's kind of messed up to think about it when you really look at it that way. I mean, right? I mean, the place is really just filled with all kinds of occult imagery, and just the souls of the undead are just everywhere within this place, right? Gibdos, Stalfos, you got the floating skull heads, right? You have Dead Hand itself, you have Bongo Bongo. It's just really a place of misery and suffering. And it's really got me curious to think about what they're going to do with this in the Ocarina of Time remake. I know I talked about this briefly in one of my other videos, but yeah, it's going to be interesting on what they're going to do, whether this is a remake or a complete reimagining. I think there's a lot of directions they could go with it in the new game. If they wanted to take it further, they're probably not. They're probably going to just sanitize it like they do with a lot of their games nowadays, since Nintendo is kind of a watered down version of what it used to be back in the 90s. But then again, who knows? Anything is possible at this point, I guess. So we'll see, right? But then another dark element you have that kind of ties into mythology, which we all know about, is the boat to the underworld, where you ring the bell and the boat takes you down what's assumed to be the River of Styx, right? And this is the boat that apparently carries the souls of the departed onto the afterlife. That's really interesting. At the end, the boat kind of just falls into a bottomless pit, and you don't know where it goes, but it drops you off at your final destination, which is the boss fight to Bongo Bongo. And we have to talk about Bongo Bongo himself, right? He's essentially just a severed, right? It's a corpse with severed hands and a severed head, right? And the weak point is where the head would be in the neck. And then you have the two hands floating in air, just beating on the drum in a kind of unsettling rhythmic type of way. And then, when you fall off the platform, which you inevitably will, you notice that it's just a green mist and kind of a slush. And there's fog down there, and it's just nothing but skulls and dead bodies off to the side of the main platform, the drum that you stand on. I thought that was kind of interesting. And so besides the boss of the dungeon itself, one thing I noticed is that you have all those heads, right? The paintings on the wall. I don't know if they're paintings or some kind of engraving, right, of those kind of creepy looking, like almost like lizard looking heads, right, that kind of taunt Link constantly about messages of misery and death and grief, in a kind of cryptic way. But then another creepy thing about the dungeon is just where it is. It's located behind the graveyard. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and you can't really see it. And when you first come in there as a child, you don't necessarily notice the temple because it's tucked back up behind the graveyard, right? And the only way to get there, I think, is by playing the Nocturne of Shadows to warp yourself up there. There's really no other way. And the door to the temple itself is completely sealed off by a puzzle you have to solve by using Din's fire to light all the torches. So getting into the temple itself is actually quite difficult, and it would be for the ordinary NPC in Hyrule. But it's something that, you think the Hyrule, royal family just wants completely forgotten about, right? They're trying to kind of bury this dark secret that they have, right, of all the dark and torturous undertakings they've indulged in during whatever wars or whatever campaigns they might have had. So yeah, I don't know, it's just interesting. I'm really curious to see what they do in the remake, right? The Shadow Temple is probably my favorite temple. It's up there with the Forest and Spirit temples, but right, I also love the Water Temple. We'll get in that another day. But yeah, this is the temple I'm most looking forward to seeing what they do with in the remake, right? My hopes are that they just completely reimagine it and crank the dark atmosphere up to 11, right? And really lean on some of the motifs that they depicted in the original N64 game, right? So all of the stuff about the death and suffering, the torture chambers, maybe they'll go deeper into what happened during the war that's initially described at the beginning of the game. That's Link's mother fled from, right? That would be interesting. I'd really love them to tie some deeper lore elements, some of the less talked about stuff of Ocarina of Time into the Shadow Temple, and kind of just tie it all in and make, let us know how that played into it, right? Because obviously this is a huge facility where a lot of stuff happened off screen, and I'd really love to know, I hope they go more in depth with the history of the Shadow Temple, because it's really just so fascinating to see and talk about and play through, But yeah, I guess at this point, only time will tell, and we won't really know until the game actually releases later this year what they're going to do, and whether they're going to improve it or completely botch it and sanitize the whole temple and make it just a shadow of its former self. Yeah, but we'll see. My expectations are kind of mixed, right? I can hope for the best, but always plan for the worst. So we'll see what happens with the Shadow Temple. But anyways, this has been a fun discussion talking about one of my favorite temples of all time in any Zelda game. And like I said, it's probably the darkest thing Nintendo's ever included in a game history. Like I don't think there's anything that really tops this as far as just the dark elements go. So anyways, let me know what you guys thought about this video. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the summer, and we're getting there. Thanks to all the new subs. I appreciate you. So if you guys like these videos, there's more coming, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got a couple others coming out this week that I'm working on, so you can look forward to that as well. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about the Shadow Temple and how it is the darkest piece of content ever included in any Nintendo game. So yeah, until next time, guys. Bye.